Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And Jason.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Today we have a whole lot of housekeeping to do. Right off the bat, it's a great day.
It's an exciting day.
And we also have a guest. And I have to say right off the bat, I love your name.
Thank you.
What was your first name again?
April.
I almost said Alice.
You're stuck on
okay.
You're stuck on the last name.
Because her anyways, doesn't matter. So we have April here in the studio, and it's going to be a great episode, or it's going to be a heavy episode, I should say. But like I said at the top, we have a lot of housekeeping. We are at our new table.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
We have our new table in front of us, and man, does it feel good.
Yes, it does.
I could see
You can
everybody.
everything.
Yeah, right.
I want to do a big shout out to Manny from Manny's Woodworking, who took an idea and a dream and made it come together for us. It's a great height. The finish is amazing, and we love it. Thank you, Manny.
Yes.
Thank you, Manny. You did a great job.
Oh, yeah. I told Stoney, I was like, if you're listening out here, Manny, we were putting the legs on, and the legs are so sturdy that I told him that I'm pretty sure we could break something else before we break the legs off.
Yes.
So,
It's
anyways.
a nice
A
table.
lot of really craftsmanship went into this table.
Some
It's-
neat details that you normally don't look at
Yes.
Yeah.
that are done. They're
Feels
just
good.
perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Right. And we also I made, as I always do, I made our Kopi Luwak, our coffee, or as it is apparently colloquially known.
Poo-poo coffee.
As poo-poo coffee,
It is known that for some reason.
the official coffee of the Retrospect podcast.
Volcanica Kopi Luwak.
Yes.
Or poo-poo coffee, as we call it, is the
Right.
official coffee of the Retrospect podcast.
In April, I got a little sip of it, and so
I
was
did. It was delicious.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, I enjoyed it.
It's a hit.
Right. Again, I don't know if it's worth that much money personally, but, hey.
To knock something off of your bucket list,
Yeah.
or
guess
to
you're
add
right.
something to your bucket list you didn't know you had.
I'm glad I did it. I mean, I don't regret not getting it because I've enjoyed it since it's come in. But I don't know if I'll spend.
Right.
Well, our
Maybe-
listeners,
I don't know if I'll
listen
spend that
to us
kind of
talk
money
about
again.
poo-poo coffee,
At least
so.
not right now. Not say never,
Well, yeah.
because that's
Never say never.
I mean, I would like to drink it some more.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll split it up with you this time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Okay.
Or maybe we can get Volcanica Kopi Luwak to send us a pound of it.
Oh,
next
no,
time.
I doubt that. There is another, there's another one we want to get. You're going to probably get pretty soon. Another.
Yeah, the
from that
Jamaican
company.
Blue Mountain pea berry, I think, or I think it's PABURY. I think
Now,
that's
this is made from the same company, right?
It
Volcanica?
comes from Volcanica. It's similar to Kopi Luwak, except of course it's not Kopi Luwak, but
Right.
it's grown at I think at the same altitude, 3,000 feet, volcanic soil. I think it's about $155 a 16-ounce bag.
There you go.
Wow.
Wow. Is it the soil that makes it really
Well,
good?
it's all grown in volcanic soil.
And what
is
does
the
that
start
do
of-
to it?
Just different minerals get
Okay.
into the it's just how
It kinda-
it's like any other plant that grows, and
It works kind of the same way that wine does in a way. Wine comes from different regions, and coffee has the same sort of thing. As if there's a lot of things. If you can get coffee from a certain region and it's not like a blend, so like there's a few characteristics. A lot of times coffees are like blends from different farms that like have a flavor profile. Whereas
I think they call that a state.
right,
And you see a state on a bottle of wine. If I remember my wine courses,
right.
I think that means they've pulled different
From
grapes from different farms.
They call that
vineyards to
for coffee. It's single origin. If you find single origin coffee, a lot of times it may be a little more expensive because it's from one farm. So
And actually, cigars are the same way, too.
Yeah.
The most famous cigars actually came from Cuba until the Revolution. And then the main cigar growers took all their seeds and left when the Revolution happened. And they all went to Nicaragua, Honduras, all these other countries. And then they started planting their seeds until they found the right soil for them. So now you can get better cigars than even in Cuba now because they've taken the time to find the right soil for their beans and make that match work too. So for me, any Rocky Patel cigar is just as good as any Cuban cigar.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
Yep.
Well,
that's an episode in the future.
right,
Yes, it is.
That's a whole
All right.
box to get into.
So, Miss April, your last name is Capochino,
Yes, that is my
April
maiden
I
name.
love
Yeah.
that name.
Yeah,
and you are a writer.
correct.
Can
I'm
you
a
tell us a little
journalist.
bit about you? Okay, I'm sorry, journalist?
Yeah, writer,
Okay.
journalist. Yep.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I have been a journalist for almost 25 years, and I've written for magazines and newspapers all over the country. I worked for daily newspapers until I had my kids, and then I freelanced. So I've done some work for the Washington Post, for National Geographic Kids, which is why your poo-poo coffee is interesting to me because I've covered a lot of animals.
Love it.
And yeah, and I started a website a couple years ago to do these really long investigative pieces.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm focusing on issues that are important to me as a mom and as as somebody living in Louisiana that are affecting me. So yeah, really.
Well, that's
excited.
my actual first question is why are we here? The subject today is fentanyl. So how did you get to do this wonderful expose on fentanyl? Why did we get here?
Yeah. So last April, I think it was April or May, my kids' school had like a lunch and learn. And the coroner came, and then a drug counselor came, and they started passing around Narcan and talking about fentanyl. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, my daughter was young in 7th grade. And I was concerned because they said Narcan is being used so often. I didn't know what Narcan was. I didn't know what it was used for. And then shortly after that, my first piece that I wrote was actually about Keep Tiger Town. Beautiful. Yep. And
Know that very well.
Yes.
and I tagged along with Jennifer Richardson, who has been a guest here. And I did a cleaning on Segan. I think that's where I first met you. Yes. Yeah. And I was floored by the amount of needles that I found. So after I did that piece in July, I started reporting on it. And it was like peeling an onion back. Like, every layer led to another question, to another person I needed to talk to. And I just wanted to write it from the perspective of a mom. Like, how is this going to affect my kids when they're in high school, when they're at a party, when they're being given something? I'm not naive to think that they're not going to ingest or try or,
or even get offered. I mean,
even get offered, right. But it's not like the first time could be their last time.
Sure.
So that's where I wanted to write it from, that perspective. And I started to look at the brain and how the brain develops, and lots of statistics. So that's where it started. It took me about 6 months to write, and I wrote a 9-piece story for my website. I didn't want to sell it to any of my my contacts because I wanted it to be as big as it was, and it turned out to be over 14,000 words.
Oh, wow.
That was going to be my first question about the
it's
whole thing.
really
Is when did you realize that it was going to be a 9-piece what did you go into it thinking like I'm gonna have a whole 9-part series, or was it just
not at all? It
right.
it developed into that because I didn't get paid for it. I mean, I've been paid for my freelance stories my whole life, and this, I knew I wasn't going to get paid for it, and I thought maybe I'll sell it at some point, but I wanted to cover it like from nuts to bolts, right, from start to finish, and I didn't want to leave anything out.
Right.
And I wanted, if somebody was going to read it, I wanted to give them every piece of information that I came across. So once I had it all reported on, like, I kind of like made myself stop. I was like, okay, you could keep going, but you're done. I just looked at how I could divide it up.
Okay.
Right.
Is there a book in the makes? Are you going to turn it into a book?
No, I don't think
Jason's
so.
read a book on this.
Yeah.
And I've read a book on it
Yes,
also.
so have I.
Did you read Fentanyl Inc.?
I
Or
didn't.
which one did you
I read
read?
Dreamland.
Okay.
That's another
That was
good
the next
one I heard.
Yeah, I heard. I was going to read
Really,
that one
really
next
good.
too.
Yeah.
So.
I imagine it probably covers the same thing. I mean,
But everybody has a spin
I
to
mean, they have a
something
different
in there.
spin on
Yeah.
it, but I think it probably all covers the same origins of where fentanyl originated from and how all this came to be. And it's, I'm very curious about your 9-part series. Can you talk about that a little bit? And
Sure, yeah. It's on my website, and April Capochino Myers. I got married, so it's Myers, but I still write with Capochino.
I like
AprilCapochinoMyers.com.
I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't give it up that easy.
I know.
Name like cappuccino.
Yeah, so it's on my website, and it's broken down based on, I cover addiction, which is a beast, right? I cover the brain. I cover what else? I cover the difference between an opioid and an opiate, which people don't understand. I cover Narcan because that's its own huge beast.
My brother is a paramedic, and he's talked pretty openly about it on our other show that we have, and that's a big thing. Is
Yes.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Narcan is like it basically like all the, whenever you take drugs, or at least when it comes to, I think, like heroin and opioids,
Correct.
a lot of times
or opiates.
it binds to certain receptors in your brain to make you feel a certain way. And whenever you take Narcan or get Narcan, it releases that, and it kind of like puts a separator between the two, to where you kind of can come to. So if you're about to like OD, a lot of times if you get Narcan, it can really help you like.
I think it unblocks the receptors or blocks the receptors where it prevents.
That's what I'm saying. It prevents the.
It brings you back to life.
Right,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's Narcan is. I mean, the drug is called naloxone. So Narcan is the one that you can sniff up your nose.
Right,
and you can get it over the counter.
Okay.
But yeah, it's on every EMS. Like every EMS person has it. Every police officer has it. They kind of give it out on the streets. Different nonprofit groups.
Right, because again, in that scenario, it could be the separation between life and death for some people if they're like really overdosing. Right. But the hard part is that it has from what I've been told, it has a significantly shorter half-life than some of those hardcore drugs do.
Yes. So
a lot of times, like, it could be that thing that's going to make you come to, but like that's not to say that it's going to, whatever drug you're taking is going to hit you back again. You're going to OD again.
And they have to Narcan you again.
Right, exactly. But sometimes like it's a hard juggling act from what I've heard. So
yeah, and the company that created OxyContin, which is where this all stemmed from,
Purdue Pharma
now creates Narcan.
Oh my!
They produce Narcan.
Well, that's kind of like, who was it? Who invented Windows? Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, yeah.
Bill Gates invented Windows, designed the first viruses, and then sold the first antiviral program.
Exactly.
I think a lot of companies kind of do that. Yeah. Same with radar detectors and radars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, let's get into this. What is fentanyl? Let's break it down to the basics and what it is and what does it do.
Yeah, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, okay, and it's 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine.
But it's also cheaper than that.
It's cheaper.
It's way cheaper.
It's cheaper, and you can get high on a smaller amount, right? Okay. So,
and if I can add, you can die on a smaller amount.
You can die on a smaller amount, too, correct. You can die on 2 milligrams of fentanyl, which is equivalent to 10 to 15 grains of table salt.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and that's my brother has talked about this as well. Like, again, they have fentanyl for specific reasons, but it's like micro doses of things that are like. Yeah.
Well, fentanyl was originally invented to help people.
It was medicinal,
because it does, at least from what he uses, or from what he says, like if in severe cases of pain, it does, it does better and safer in some ways in a controlled environment than like morphine would, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
But when taken out of that context is when things get screwy. I mean, with any drugs really. But.
Didn't I read somewhere that open heart surgery couldn't have been done without fentanyl?
It was actually it was fentanyl that
allowed that to happen.
Like I said,
it's actually an analog that they use now for that. But
in certain cases, it could be good, but
right.
That doesn't mean that it can't be also used for bad in a lot of ways.
And the fentanyl that's on the street is it's like Walter, what's the guy's name from Breaking Bad?
Walter Wright.
Right. Like it's made in those types of labs, right? So like medicinal fentanyl, we had a friend who almost died from COVID, and he was in the hospital for 66 days, and he was on life support. They had given him fentanyl, like a little bit to keep him pain-free. This is not that.
Of course.
This is being cut into every drug.
It's a designer drug, basically.
Right. But it's cut into everything. So it's cut into pills, it's cut into heroin, and where I live, 80% of all overdose deaths are fentanyl related. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, it's in marijuana. It's in everything.
Well, they're putting it into it for the addictive properties of it.
Correct. And they don't care if they kill you because there's 10 people behind that person that wants it. Right.
It's funny that you talk about that. You would think that's kind of counterintuitive that drug dealers would want to kill people who buy their drugs. But
it just really sounds bad for business.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but you're going for the highest high too. If
conventional wisdom would tell you that, but I mean, the book I'm reading right now called Fentanyl Inc. By Ben Westhoff. It's funny that it says in there that the dealers say when the drugs kill somebody, there's more people that want the drug because the high.
Mm-hmm. They realize
it's
if you're
really,
getting the highest
really
high
good.
to almost kill you, it's got to be great.
They're not thinking about dying. They
Nope.
They don't care about that. So it's but just kind of an FYI to our listeners. The person responsible for the creation of fentanyl is a Belgian chemist by the name of Paul Janssen, if I'm pronouncing. He's now deceased. He died in 2003. But he produced over 80 drugs that's associated to just his name.
Wow.
Yeah. He's
in the 60s, right? Was it in the 60s? Or was it
well, I mean, he was born in 26. He worked for his father, who was also a doctor. Mm-hmm. And actually, so funny, what inspired him was the death of his sister. Wow. Kind of reminds me of another person we talked about, that something was inspired by the death of a close family member.
We talked about Nikola Tesla, and that was a big thing.
Yeah.
His mother, was it his mother who passed away? No, it was his brother.
It was his brother.
It was his brother that passed away, and he started
having visions.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Bright flashes of light, and it would give him an idea.
Right, and he would start creating things from it.
But yeah, but this guy is incredible, and as I said, 80 drugs associated with this guy. He started his own company called Janssen Pharmaceutica, which was eventually bought by Johnson & Johnson in 1961, I believe.
Oh, wow.
He continued working for the company, and he just kept producing analogs of fentanyl.
But he may have invented it, but that's not where it's made now.
The
biggest producer of fentanyl now is China.
It's China, correct?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is it's illegal to consume fentanyl in China, but it's not illegal to make it. And one day I think we should talk about having a little conspiracy on this.
Right.
I'm wondering in my heart if China is not using that to destabilize America.
Well, funny thing, you talk about China. In his obituary, when his funeral for Paul Janssen, he was very fond of China.
Really?
Matter of fact, he was the first Western pharmaceutical factory that opened in China was Paul Janssen.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
Yes. And he actually was so well thought of in China, he's the only one to get an honorary doctorate from the Chinese.
Okay.
Wow.
So, yes. So, it's no wonder why China now is the number one producer of all the ingredients to make fentanyl.
Right now in the news, the border is
wide open.
Wide open. And they've, over the last number of months, maybe 3 months, the Chinese nationals that have been crossing the borders and getting caught or getting caught with fentanyl has increased over tenfold. So they're just dumping this stuff and they're making it over there, bringing it to America, and just unloading it.
And people are dying over here because of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy to think that something that is made probably with good intentions and really could change the way medicine looks as far as pain relief and surgeries and could really change the world. It just feels, it's so funny how the disparity between the purpose of it and probably the good that it has done and can do versus the other end of the spectrum of how bad it also is, and how right now in this society, in this climate, how awful it is. And it just feels so, it's interesting talking about it because it just feels so black and white. I feel like there's no middle ground. It's either
well, if you think about this, and I hate to say this, but Coke got its name for a reason.
You're
and
right.
people wondered how women could do so much back in the early days. And they were drinking Coke with Coke in it. And I hate to say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
Coke had cocaine in it.
Yes.
And the early purposes of cocaine were usable. Now people abuse it.
Right.
The early invention of fentanyl was to save a life or help a life or take pain away from somebody
Right.
And now it's being abused and cheaply made and brought in, I believe, as a destabilization to America.
And it could be, but it was synthesized in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I didn't even
Now,
know that.
in Europe, it before it came here. Now, there was a push to actually not approve fentanyl in the United States. It was finally approved in 1968 after much convincing. But there was an opportunity there for it to never even be approved.
Well,
in the United States,
the opioid, not even the crisis, when opioids were first started in America, they were sold as a non-addictive, great drug that anybody could take and it's not going to hurt anybody.
It had the time release. That's
it had
why.
the time release. It had all of these things. And then so many doctors and hospitals were being bribed. And there was even a company that were paying women to go sleep with doctors to prescribe the opioids more. I mean, come on.
Well, I recall growing up, I knew a lot of people that were going into pharmaceutical sales, and there was a ton of money being made back then. If I recall, it's like maybe during the 90s, if I recall, that was a big push, amount of money that was being made. I mean, I used to talk to these people. I was like, how much are you making a year? It's like incredible.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in pharmacy sales.
Well, little did we know what actually was going on.
Right.
Of course, nobody, I mean, I'm sure they didn't really know how that would kind of descend into chaos. But, yeah.
Well, it's all about the dollar. We've said that on the podcast. Until greed is cured in America, nothing's going to be fixed.
Yep. As a journalist, you follow the money.
You follow the money.
And when
That's
you're done
right.
following the money, you follow some more
So
money.
when did it?
Even as like a photographer. I mean, I've done freelance photography stuff and a musician. I mean, I've been a quote unquote struggling artist for a majority of my 20s. So I get it. There's like, you just
I don't
chase
know.
that
We don't
bigger.
look like a struggling podcast.
Well,
with this
I said I
wonderful
would.
table here.
I said
Thank
I
you,
was.
Manny.
Yeah.
So when did fentanyl become an epidemic in America?
After
it feels recent.
Yeah.
It
well,
does,
after
kinda.
the pill mills were shut down, right? Heroin came on the scene as the replacement for that.
Well, heroin is done a couple of times in America. Back in the 50s and 60s, heroin was so cheap, and they went to underprivileged people, and then it kind of died off, and then cocaine kind of took over, and then cocaine got really expensive, and heroin's made a huge, big comeback.
Right.
And
it was after those pill mills were shut down, after, legislation came about. And then once heroin started to become really expensive, fentanyl kind of took over, and they started making fentanyl. Fentanyl is very easy to make.
Do you have like a time frame of when that might have been?
2012 is what it was. I have to go back and look
But
at
that's
the
kind of
story.
the start. The last couple of years has just been insane. How many people died last year, do you think?
In America?
Yes.
A little bit over 70,000. Wait, no, that's 2021. Last year was a little over 110,000.
Oh my gosh.
And the year before that, it was a little over 70. And that was another reason I wanted to do this story. When I started looking at the statistics on the coroner's website, I think in 2012, there was like 20-something people that had died of overdoses. And then in 2021, there was 311.
Jeez.
And I was just like, that's... Like, and I started doing the percentage, right? And I'm just like, what the heck? Like, this is like 150%. Like, it was crazy.
That is
well, it's also
growth.
been a huge thing in the raves early in the 80s and stuff like that when raves came out. I even hosted raves at a time, but it was mostly ecstasy.
Stony raves?
And it was in my
and
early
LSD,
days. And
yeah.
LSD
Yeah.
and things
Yeah.
like that. And
big.
raves were somewhat safe. I did it for the music and for the money. I did not partake in the drugs, but that became a thing. It became a drug haven, and that's kind of when I got out of it, and they died off a little bit, and then now they've picked back up with the EDM music and things like that, and fentanyl is front and center. Front and center on the raves now.
And remember, it's in everything, right?
Right.
So it's cut into different drugs,
Right.
because it's an opioid. So it's synthetic, so you can make it anywhere.
And that's how they're getting around a lot of the laws, because when you change just one little thing in it, it becomes something
Just
else.
manipulate the molecular structure.
And it's
Right.
now it's legal.
That's right.
And then they come in and pass a law and they manipulate something else. And they may make it stronger. They may make it, worse. And they just keep playing around with it until it's legal again, and then it's out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these are all the coverage that I did was just all about illicit drugs.
Sure.
I don't know too much about medicinal fentanyl except to mention that it came about in the 60s. And I heard what you had heard, but I was just focusing on the illicit drugs. Like, what could kids get at a party? That's where my reporting
Well,
was
unfortunately, a lot of these things, you said, they start off with a good intent.
Right.
focused. Right.
Unfortunately, those formulas get out there, and then you've got these rogue chemists that
Right.
can just start manipulating these structures, and you can produce all the designer drugs you want.
What was the drug they had in the trailers driving around?
Talk about meth?
Meth. Yeah,
Yeah,
the meth
meth.
trailers, and now fentanyl is kind of the same thing being brought in from, everybody can make it now. I heard you say something earlier about opioids and opiates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Opiates. Opiates and opioids.
What's the difference? What's the big difference in that?
Opiates need to be grown in kind of Mother Nature, right? So heroin, morphine, all the opium poppies. Opioids are synthetic. They can kind of be grown in a lab. So that's why, like fentanyl, Percocet, OxyContin, Tramadol, which we actually used for our dog when he was really sick. And I'm always like, this is not good.
Yeah.
So because you need Mother Nature to grow heroin, right? It does tend to be more expensive depending on
I didn't know that.
if the elements are there.
I knew
right?
morphine was. I didn't know
Poppy
that heroin
plants.
was.
Yeah, the poppy plants. But
But that's why when they go in there and they just firebomb the,
Right.
the poppy fields.
Morphine has been around, though, since
Oh, for-
a
yeah, a long
painkiller, probably
Right.
since the Revolutionary War.
Right.
right.
So they've been knowing how to extract what they need to extract to
Right.
Well,
create morphine.
and I hate to say this again, but early on you had the Chinese opium dens.
Right.
The Chinese have kind of been in this a long time.
Right.
They've
Right.
been doing this a long time. Even when America in the early foundings, we did a expose on Arthur Stilwell and the railroads. When they brought in the Chinese to work on the railroads, they had opium dens that would follow them around because they were into that big time.
Yeah, one of the documentaries I watched was Maria Van Zeller, and she from National Geographic Channel, and she followed the process of how fentanyl is made. So all the way from like the collecting the ingredients in the ocean that are coming from China into Mexico, and like just each step of the way. She ordered fentanyl from China online, and I had no problem with it. So it's a really good documentary if you want to see exactly how the process, how it goes through the process.
Oh, so the Chinese, so you're saying the Chinese are making actually a finished product?
Yes.
And then they're selling it, or are they selling the ingredients to the cartels
Both.
and then they're making it, so it's both?
Both is what, according to her documentary, it's both.
But
Right.
they're actually making it there.
Yeah, you can
Because
get
I
it.
thought
And it's not illegal to make there. It's
Right.
illegal to consume there.
okay.
Because
lot of-
they're what I'm sorry, and what they're doing is they're making it and they're sending it to America. And that's why I personally believe that it's a destabilization of America.
I've only done a very little looking into it, but China has a very holistic approach to medicine. So a lot of times they don't allow a lot of medications at all. It's very much just go, whenever COVID was happening, it was a big thing about just go drink some green tea and go, sit out in the sun for a while. That's kind of how that's their approach to a lot of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if that also kind of factors into it, because they don't, when it comes to medical treatments, from what I've heard, it's not a lot.
Huh.
There's also a lot.
So they really don't have a structured approach to...
Well, they do, but it's
yeah.
more of Zen. It's more of the
Yeah.
body energy. They're the ones who mapped out the body first.
Right. If you do I don't know the full extent of it, so I'm a little ignorant, and I'm maybe speaking out of line, but I've read stories and watched videos on, for instance, if you were in the hospital dying, I don't know how the structure works, but if your next of kin is I don't want them to know their medical reports, they can have all your medical stuff and basically tell you that everything's going to kind of be okay, and you could basically be on your deathbed and that kind of. It's like from what I've heard, it gets kind of into that sort of territory where like it's a little muddy, and so I wouldn't be surprised if drugs like that is not really.
Well, morphine is used in hospice extensively,
right?
Because once you go into hospice, I just lost my grandmother in January, and as sweet of a lady as she was in a lot of pain, and she became violent, and she spent the last couple of weeks on morphine. They knew her life was over, and it was just to keep her comfortable and keep her out of pain,
right,
and keep her sedated.
Yeah, matter of fact, part of the reason fentanyl was actually created because they were looking for an alternative to morphine.
Right.
So it's just...
And morphine was a huge drug in the Vietnam War.
It's been a huge drug, I think, going
Right.
way back. There's a lot of guys that were addicted to morphine.
Yes. Came back addicted to morphine.
Right, and that's an opiate, right? So if Mother Nature's not providing, it can't be grown from the poppy plant.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So fentanyl, though, can be made anywhere. So I think that's important to understand. And if there's a demand for it, there's going to be a supply for it. And there's a huge demand for it right now.
Well, we just kind of talked about it. So does fentanyl affect the brain differently than a lot of drugs? How does it actually affect the brain? What is creating the addiction, and what does it do for the brain?
Yeah, so it affects 3 different parts of the brain. I'm pulling out my notes here because it's been, like I said, I write these stories.
Notes are okay here. Actually,
Okay,
I'm
good.
very surprised, and we haven't picked on Jason because normally he's got about 3 or 4 inches worth of notes, and now he's just got a book and about a quarter of an inch of notes here. But
I think that's my
I
series.
try to be prepared, everyone.
Yeah, I write these big pieces, and I'm almost like myopic about it, right? Like I can't sleep, and I write them, and then I publish them, and then I'm done. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of move on to the next thing. So I had to go back and look at a lot of this. But yes, fentanyl affects the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of that decision-making part of the brain that doesn't develop until later in everybody, and even later in men, in boys. So if it's not even developed in a 16-year-old, right? So like they're not even able to access that part of their brain. And it affects the basal ganglia, which is the reward part of the brain, right? This is where like the pleasurable activities part of the brain processes. So this is also called the brain's reward circuit. And this is where you kind of produce that euphoria. And we're dopamine seekers. So we love, 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 love to feel good. And dopamine is a hormone that's secreted from the brain. So the other part of the brain, so there's 3 parts, the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, and then the extended amygdala. And that handles the anxious and stressful and irritable feelings. So when somebody tries to come off of an opioid, the effects of, they call it dope sick, which have you ever seen that show?
I have just started watching it.
It's incredible, and it's so well done.
What was the name of it again?
Dope sick.
It's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu with Michael Keaton. But coming off the withdrawal symptoms of coming off of an opioid, how it was described to me, is brutal. It's like having the flu for like 2 weeks, like terrible, terrible side effects. And that's that part of the brain.
They said early on that heroin, once you tried it, you were kind of addicted to it for the rest of your life to a certain extent. If you tried it a couple of times, you were definitely addicted to it for the rest of your life.
Right. So opioids will corrupt your brain. It's a brain disease, right? And then if you stop taking it, it takes 6 months for all those parts to come back online, for all the neural pathways to start
That's why it's so
firing
hard.
again. Exactly. Exactly. And people take it because they're in pain. Either they're in emotional pain, physical pain. But then when they stop taking it, they're in pain. So it becomes very cyclical. It's very, very difficult to get off of. And there's not a lot of services and not a lot of help out there that's going to keep somebody for 6 months. 6 months in rehab is a lot of money.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we as a society have really, I mean, I hate to say it, that I think we've kind of gone down a wrong path where to avoid pain at all costs.
Correct.
And I do believe as part of the human experience, it means that sometimes I'm not going to feel good. Mm-hmm. And you know what? That's okay.
Yep.
Because that's part of being human.
Exactly. That's what I teach my kids. Yeah.
It's just, you have to kind of just work your way through those things.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in our desire to always feel good, I think has led us and conditioned us as a society to look for ways to alleviate pain.
Yep, I completely agree with that. I always tell my kids, like life's 50-50, right? Like it's 50% good, it's 50% bad. But you wouldn't know the good if you didn't have the bad, because that word would never even exist.
I said that before. I had a mentor of mine one time who had said, like, I hope that you're healthy, but I hope that you get a little bit sick. Mm-hmm. I hope that you find great wealth, but I also hope that you struggle to have some money. Yep. And at the time when he was saying all that, I was like, I don't think I fully understand what he's getting at because of the conversation we were having. But he was like, sometimes it takes you getting sick just a little bit to appreciate how grateful you are that you're healthy.
Right.
And it's those kind of moments that got to take with the good with the bad sometimes.
Well, I kind of like what you said about the society creating this problem. There's a quote from a novel by Michael Hoff. It says, "Hard times create strong men."
You said
and
that before,
early on in America, we talked about crossing the Continental Divide one time. If you ever go over that on a motorcycle or try to walk over it, you realize how hard these people actually wanted to get over that.
That's right.
In horse-drawn wagons or by horse or by foot. And so the saying goes, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And it's sickly. It's this very big circle that's continuing. And now America is in that point in time now where we've created easy times. And now people are becoming weaker. They don't take that pain as much.
Yep.
They want to blame somebody else. They want to do something else, or they don't want to suffer at all.
We are a victim of our own success.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
And
unfortunate
that's what
because
this
your
saying says.
ancestors, what do parents always say? I want you to have a better life than I did.
Right.
But my question is that really good?
Or I want you to be happy, but like you said, there's no exit ramp to the human experience, right? So what we have to teach our kids, and this was the conclusion of my piece. So I was like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, like, let them be in pain, April. Like, let them feel that and learn how to deal with adversity.
Well, we protect our kids. Not to interrupt you, and I
Right.
want you to finish that thought, but something I heard one time, that the best thing you could do for your baby is to let it crawl on the New York subway floor.
Right.
Because we have protected our
but yes.
kids to so much
Right.
degree that a little sickness can
Right.
cause. Give them back
Yes.
the antibodies. Give them back these childhood sicknesses and make them stronger and make them
Right.
tougher to where when it comes, they can handle it better.
Or just teach them how to navigate it because it's a part of life. I mean, my son plays baseball, and I love the fact that it's like 90% failure, right? Because then we can talk about it and we can say, yeah, like maybe you messed up or you didn't do well.
Yeah.
But you're not a problem. It's just what you're going through, and this is how
Right.
you can deal with it. But I think it's so shame-provoking, right? Like we feel like there's something wrong with us if we can't do this, or it's embarrassing to have a kid that's feeling this or feeling that. And it's not about that. It's just about that everybody is dealing with the same issues, and we just need to normalize it and say, like Jason said, this is the human experience. This is it, guys. Like we don't get a free pass.
But pain is something. I had an
Yep.
uncle when he was 17 years old, had a toothache. At 17 years old, he had every tooth pulled and had dentures from the time he was 17 on, because he said, I'm never going through that pain again. And I'm like, wow. Think about that. 17 years old,
Right.
dentures.
Pull
and
out all my teeth.
Pull them all out. So we don't deal with pain like people used to.
right.
I have a great story about kind of what you were talking about a little while ago with your son and his baseball. I used to do karate for a long time, and I'm the kind of person that once I put like myself into something, I usually put like a whole 100% of myself into it.
Enneagram 1. Yep.
Right, exactly. Right. So I will go all the way,
Yep.
and I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I want it to be
Yep.
as best I can. I did karate and I did tournaments, and so I strived to place first in everything, and I did until I made it to an international tournament that we had. And again, I was maybe less than 10 years old, and I don't think I fully grasped what was happening. I was just like, I'm doing this, I'm going to do it the best I can, and I want to be the best. And I placed third in international, and I thought that I was a failure. And looking back on it, I was like, I was with people from around the world.
Right.
I was doing something, and third place may not be perfect from what I was in that time. I remember crying about it. I was like, probably less than 10 years old, and was like sad that I wasn't the best of the best, because I was like, that's what I wanted to be.
Right.
And then looking at like hindsight now, after living through that, and my mom being there for me and saying like, that's okay. Sometimes you're not going to have first place. And sometimes whenever you are dealing with people on this scope from around the world, third place is also really great. And like looking back on it now, like I said, looking at those trophies and those pictures and, kind of reminiscing on that, I was like, that felt like the end of the world right there for that 10-year-old me. But looking back, I was like, that's kind of impressive. And I was like, but I couldn't see through the disparity of that moment.
Yeah, and now you have a whole bunch of kids that are being raised in like a social media setting too. Whereas like even if they've done their best or they feel good about something, they hop on and they're like, oh, I'm comparing. Like it becomes a lot of otherism. Like, well, I'm not as good as this person or that person. So the emotional pain is kind of what I focused on. Like, how do we let our kids feel pain without wanting to fix it? I'm a fixer. Like I have that in me. So I learned just to let my kids cry and say to them, it's okay to cry. Like these are feelings, like they'll pass. So they know how to feel things. They know how to deal with adversity. They know when something doesn't go their way. I'm not coming in to fix it. That's part of life. Like you're going to have to learn how to navigate it. And that's what we have sometimes. Sometimes life sucks and embrace the suck. And sometimes it's amazing.
Right.
But it's all encompassing.
Right.
So
that's really great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard. When you're a parent, it's so hard.
Right.
Even you want to protect your children.
Yes.
When I was growing up, when I was in high school, junior high and high school, things were different.
Right.
You had your truck, you went to school. You had a rifle and a shotgun on the back window. You got out of the truck, you closed the door, and you reached in the window and you locked the door from the outside. The worst we had to deal with was drinking beer.
Right.
That was it. That was the worst.
Right.
And now, I don't know what the statistics are, but I think like over 70% of kids in high school are going to have alcohol.
Right. And
I think maybe you know better. What would the drug ratio be? Is it like 50% are going to have tried drugs?
70% of kids, by the time they graduate from high school, now this came from a neuroscientist. I didn't interview her. I studied a lot of her work, and I pulled this quote. Her name's Judith Griesel from Bucknell. She said, by the time they graduate from high school, 70% of kids will have drunk alcohol, half will have tried an illegal drug, and about close to that many will have smoked or vaped nicotine, and 1 in 5 will have used prescriptions off-label. It's a fact that most people who have a substance abuse disorder will have used before they were 18. And remember, part of the brain is not even developed yet. So that statistic to me was frightening because if they use prescription drugs, we know that it will eventually lead to fentanyl because it's cheaper and you get a better high even.
Well, it's like you said, it's in everything. I've even heard that from friends of mine that do partake in weed recreationally. They're like, you gotta be careful sometimes where you get it and who you get it from, at least in this neck of the woods, because of like, it's laced with all kinds of stuff that they don't fully understand. It's
not the weed that my friend smoked in high school, and I graduated in 96.
Not your mama's weed.
No, it's not. And it's, and it's kind of like, that's the stuff you really shouldn't have to worry about because kids are going to at least either be around it or try it. So my goal was just to give them enough information that they understood this. My son helped me with the graphics on my story.
That's cool.
And I petrified them though, because around Halloween they were like, "Mom, can I eat this candy? Is there fentanyl in it?" And I'm like, "No, you can eat the candy."
Fine,
yeah.
There's an old saying that says if you teach your kids how to work on old trucks and motorcycles, they're not going to have enough money for drugs.
Right.
So we're also not teaching our kids the right things.
Right.
And I've said this before, and I'm going to say this quote again because I love it, by Chip Foose. He's a great, great car maker. He does custom cars. And he says, we're not teaching our kids anymore how to build something. We're only teaching them how to buy something.
Right.
And that's part of this process. It all becomes a learned behavior. So if they learn that they can get these things and now get them cheaply, and then they don't have a decision-making capability yet built into their brain,
Right.
and then I can do this, I can drink this, I can take this, and it takes this away, by the time they develop that decision-making policy in their own brain,
Right.
we've developed habits. And that's where addiction comes from, because
Right.
it's so easy to make that.
You know, April, I read your 9-part series.
All 14,000 words?
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot.
It's a lot of words.
I found it interesting. You cited a study that was done by Louisiana State University that I have here. It was called The Criminal Justice Response to the Opioid Crisis in East Baton Rouge Parish. And I found this little statistic kind of eye-opening. From 1999 to 2008, opioid prescription sales in the United States increased by 400%.
Jeez.
Consumption of hydrocodone increased by over 200%, and consumption of oxycodone increased by nearly 500%. You know, they said as prescriptions of opioids increased, so did overdose deaths from prescription opioids. In 2008, prescription opioid-related overdose deaths in the United States accounted for 73.8% of the 20,044 prescription drug overdose deaths that accounted for 40.6% of the 36,450 overall drug deaths. I think we're an over-medicated society.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that.
I agree too.
I mean, these numbers are just
But it's about the money.
eye-opening.
It's about the money. It's not necessarily the people. Now it's
Well,
about the doctors saying, here, take this. Here, take this. Here, take this.
I think it's a both and kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's just one or the other, because I think now more so than ever, especially after the pandemic, I hate to keep bringing it up, but I think people have a real substance abuse problem, just more so than
There was a lot of psychological issues as a result of this.
COVID changed the face of America.
This was the first time where people were truly locked down, and you know, in different parts of the country, that lockdown was different.
Yeah.
In some states, I mean, you couldn't even walk outside your house almost. I mean, I read stories that they were ticketing people for cutting their grass.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is ludicrous. You know, now I think some sense is finally, you know, coming in. But, I mean, it's just some of this stuff is... But it caused some major psychological issues, and I think part of that has led people to find an escape.
When I think...
A
think
cheap escape, too,
A cheap
because they didn't have a lot of
I
money.
mean,
I think that I don't have any statistics, and I could just be speaking out my butt here, but I feel like that kind of mindset about I am sad or I am upset, I'm gonna go run to substance was kind of already there. I'm just meaning that milestone in history, I think, really was a jumping off point for a lot of people.
Yeah.
In a bad way, I feel like. And
I agree,
so I think, like I
100%.
said, I think it's a both and. I think it probably that medical companies are dumping a lot of money into making fentanyl probably more available, because it's probably, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more requested.
They have to get it in the hands of real patients.
Right.
And then somebody's going to find it in grandma's medicine cabinet.
Right.
And then the cycle just balloons from there.
Well, and remember, the more you use, the more you need to use,
Right.
right? Because your brain's adjusting. So
Right.
it becomes a very expensive habit. I mean, for people that are that addicted. Did you all see the Murdoch trial? And has anybody followed that?
A little bit.
He said he was buying $50,000 worth of pills a week,
that's...
and I was like,
Who
How
has
do you
that kind
have-
of money?
Right.
or I think he'd be dead. That's a lot. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
lot of, but maybe, I mean, I don't know. I've never used any types of pills, but I know that you definitely build up that tolerance. And it's the same with any sort of opioid, right? With heroin, with fentanyl. So it just becomes your entire life. And then with addiction's a brain disease and it takes over. So the only thing you think about is where to get the next fix, right? Because you're trying to not be dope sick. You're trying not to have to go through those withdrawals. And it's just like staying, what do they call it? Chasing the dragon or something. Yeah.
Yeah. China White.
China White.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Just to kind of circle back around, I had
Yeah.
looked up while we were talking. I looked up some more information about and now again, this could be very false, but when it comes to like healthcare in China, a lot of times the study that I was referring to, people that had cancer, and before they were doing chemotherapy, they would tell the family, and then the family would make the decision on if the patient in question was to know about it. And it was saying that about 60% of the patients did not know that they had cancer or were about to go underneath chemotherapy. And that was the family's decision to either let them know or not let them know.
But they also believe that the mind is the greatest cure for anything.
Right.
And
that's,
so
and
you
I
don't
think
want
it's
to tell
also,
somebody something negative because they may believe
but
it.
I think they were doing that because of other family dynamics and other wellness regulations and rules.
I've been healed a number of times for many horrible injuries from acupuncture.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it works.
I've never tried acupuncture.
It is amazing.
I've heard it's good.
And
I think I'm okay.
well, you know what?
No,
we thought we were okay too till we tried the poo-poo coffee. We were all like, right. And then you try it, now you want it again.
But this one's a little less painful to get involved in, I think, for me.
Especially if they wash the beans off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, it just, there's the validity to a lot of things in this world, and pain is pain. And once you get used to getting a couple of little needles in you, the benefit on the other end is wonderful.
Right.
There you go.
But that's what these other things do, is they take the pain away and they make it easy.
Right.
And they don't work.
Right.
They make it go away for a little while, but that's part of addiction too. It becomes a learned behavior, and your brain takes over, and then the addiction takes over, and this is what you got left with. And now what are we going to do to get the next high?
Right. It destroys everything. Yeah.
But it just destroys you, but it also destroys your family.
It turns you into a different person.
Yes.
Oh, it destroys your family, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way to really save somebody that's addicted. They have to do it themselves. I started meditating about a year ago, and I'm teaching my kids to do it too. And it's like 10 minutes a day, and I'm not sitting in crisscross applesauce. Like I'm in a comfortable position, and there's an app. So but I do it, and it creates these new neural pathways where when something's going wrong, right, in my life, which is inevitable to happen, it gives me the space that I know, okay, take a couple deep breaths, right? Like go through it. So I've taught my kids how to do that. Are they doing it every day? Absolutely not. They think I'm crazy sometimes. But there's some times at night where they're like, hey, Mom, you want to put that app on? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Right.
10 minutes, and we do that. So there's a lot of different ways to teach our kids, a lot of different tools we can give them so that if adversity hits and if it strikes, they don't go the route that they could go. Because once you get in that dark hole, it's really, really hard to get out of. And that's kind of like the whole conclusion of this piece is like, okay, what can I do? Because I looked at the law enforcement part. I looked at like the border, right? Like I don't have the power to close the border. I can elect people, and there's legislation that can be passed, but like me personally, like what can I do in my corner of the world? I can teach my kids how to deal with emotional pain.
That's awesome.
I can give them the tools so they know, hey, if somebody offers me this pill at a party, don't take it, right?
Right.
Even if it's a friend.
Yeah.
Sure.
You never know.
The sad part about it, there are a lot of kids, though, that come from environments that they don't have a loving parent to help them.
We've talked about that on the podcast also.
Yeah.
And those are lost souls, and it's they're ripe to be the next addict.
You mentioned a little while ago about like giving kids a hobby to not have enough money to buy drugs, and I was thinking about it. Once I got my braces back whenever I was like probably 12 or 13, I picked up music, and that was a big thing for me. Also talking about like meditating in a certain way. Like there was so many times where I remember going in my room and playing music and just like,
that's an escape.
Well, it was not it wasn't just an escape. For me, it was something for me to be disciplined at, because I, again, just like with karate, like I wanted to be really good at it in my own way. And so I remember having the ability to take that. Well, I also, again, spent a lot of money in those years. What little money I did have as an early teenager from odd jobs, I spent on different music stuff or whatever. And that was a big, I just remember that being a big thing for me. It's like maybe not being mindful in the aspect you're talking about, where you can meditate and just take a deep breath and go, like, and ground yourself, like I may do now as an adult. Like I feel like I know that because it's also talked about, between a lot of therapists and people, like just take your moment to be present in the moment. Mm-hmm. I know that now, but like looking back on it, I still have this nostalgia for sitting down with my instruments and just being able to play music and just kind of get lost in that moment. And that really helps ground me. And so I guess I'm just saying that to say, find that thing in your life that can help kind of fill a void,
right?
Where I guess a substance may be it, or if anybody out there, if any young person's out there that's listening that can glean some sort of knowledge from this, is just find a craft, find something that inspires you, find something that drives you, and just be disciplined to just keep at it, and you'd be surprised what it can do in your life. I think with
that's
whatever.
Awesome. That's a good. Thank you for
great.
sharing that. That's amazing.
Because I've done that with many things as well. Not only is it just music, but I remember like the first camera that I had gotten my hands on. I really wanted to learn more about that, and this is just maybe my personality type. But like it's just those kind of, I've heard from numerous people, like carpentry and stuff like that, that, like things that I would love to learn how to do, like this beautiful table we have. I would love to learn how to build a table like this, but I know there's somebody out there that has even probably Manny's testimony in his life about how, where he's kind of come from and how he's kind of come into like making this table.
Sure.
It's like that kind of like what is his story?
Maybe I can ask him to join the podcast.
Yeah.
There you go.
He would be a great guest.
I don't know him very well, but from what little bit I do know, it is a great story about how his business has started up and how he's gotten to this point to make this amazing table. And I think that's just awesome.
Yeah.
And I think if there's anybody, that's what I'm trying to say as well. If there's anybody out there, nothing wrong with teaching people, or nothing wrong with learning a craft that you can get good at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you said, filling that void, right? And realizing that your brain's going to tell you all sorts of crazy things. That's what the brain does. It's like, we call it the monkey brain all the time.
Yeah.
Right? I'm always like my daughter's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. And like, my friend said this. And I'm like, is it reality, or is like your monkey brain kind of going crazy? Because it's trying to protect you. Mm-hmm. Like normalizing all these things and putting your energy into something that is tangible.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I love volunteering with Keep Tigertown Beautiful, because you're like tangibly doing something. And I'm like, I'm making this city better.
Exactly.
And like I'm doing, but it doesn't, not everybody has that. And there's a privilege to having that, which I think is what Jason was saying. Not every kid out there has that opportunity. But if you do have the opportunity and you can pass it along and help somebody else, I mean, that's always good too.
Sometimes friends may come and go, family may come out of your life or whatever, and obviously substance isn't going to fix the issue. So between like people and substances that could help alleviate a situation, sometimes if you want something done, you got to do it yourself.
Right.
Is what I've learned in my going through my 20s. I just recently turned 29, so I feel like I'm really starting to get on the book end of my 20s, where I'm like, okay, what do I really feel about some situations?
So you shouldn't just wander idly through life.
Well, in your 20s, you should.
We don't do that anymore. I think that's part of the problem today. Peer pressure. We've talked about, somebody handing you a pill or a drink or something like that.
Yeah.
Peer pressure today is so much more intense than it was when I was in high school. Yeah, you had a couple little people trying to do this.
100%.
You knew who the potheads were down on the corner. You knew that. But now today we are so socially motivated.
It's social media.
And social media. You know how I feel about social media. But now that's part of its own drug. It's the addiction.
Yes.
Now we're giving kids these cell phones at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. They're becoming addicted to electronics, and I'm experiencing that with somebody firsthand right now. And so now we've already put that addictive personality into them. Now it's the dopamine. I get the likes. Somebody's friended me. Oh my God, I got 1,000 people watch that video.
That's that dopamine hit.
It's like a tiny squirt of dopamine, and it's a tiny, and it's all those little tiny.
And that's
squirts.
what I hate to say this. That's what money is too.
Yep.
Money is a dopamine fix. Every time you get that paycheck, you go, ooh, yay, or something, or that tip, or whatever. So we're creating these addictive personalities, and now the social construct is so different. Peer pressure is so much greater now.
I think it doesn't help that, again, we're also in a culture now, at least circles that I have been in, friends, artists, musicians, you name it. The circle is like, if you're not happy, if things don't go your way, there are things available to help cut the edge.
And somebody to blame.
Well, or you're right, yeah, that too. But like, so in that scenario,
true.
like as if it's not already bad enough that like, we have people that are dependent on
because it's
social
your
media.
Fault. Instead of me fixing myself, I'm just going to take this drug here and I'm going to make it go away for a little while, but it's still your fault.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Is like it's like that is that is the norm.
Sure.
Right.
That is the narrative now of like if it's not going your way, you can just go ahead and smoke a little weed and make yourself feel better at night or something.
Because
or
if it's
whatever.
not going your way, then there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Not that there's an accountability and that your behavior, right? It's like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. And that's not the reality at all. But we all feel that way.
Yeah.
Right? We all feel that way.
I felt that way.
When did this take root?
Oh, I don't even know.
I mean, when do you trace the origins? I mean, how do we get to this point? How do we not?
It feels like a slow burn. It
I
feels
think
like
it's
something
always
is.
been here. It's just different. Like, so say somebody didn't, wanted to say something about you at school, or there was like a rumor they wanted to spread, right? Like they would have to wait till the next day to do it. And like by note or by, like I used to have a phone with like a cord that I would drag to the closet and my dad would be like 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
But now it's everything so instantaneous that
Right.
it becomes, kids are the same.
Right.
They're developing the same, but they're developing under this umbrella of social media that we don't even know the effects of it. I think it's completely detrimental to the brain. And I'm not a neurosurgeon. I just look at the way my kids behave if they have too much of it.
I mean, look what's
Right?
going on right now with TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they had hearings today. The CEO of TikTok was testifying in front of Congress, trying to save his company.
My daughter asked me the other day, when can I get it? And I said, when you're old enough. And I'm hoping,
Right.
yeah, but I don't have it. I don't want any
I've
part
never
of
had
that.
TikTok.
I feel like it should be treated like a drug. I feel like
Yes.
social media should be treated like a drug, and that's
And would you give a 12-year-old a drug?
no, of course
No,
not.
exactly.
No.
And that's what we are like.
And
we're
I
doing.
feel the same. Like there's been I've said this on the podcast before. Like I have really taken a full step back from social media in the past probably 2 or 3 years since COVID. I just realized that I don't like the landscape. I don't like the conversations that are being had a lot of times. And that's probably also just circles that I follow. But like I just don't the way it makes me feel. Sometimes the instant gratification of things, sometimes the sadness of it all. I have realized that I have gotten my news from other areas. I've gotten my stuff that's going on in the world from other areas, and I can really take a step back. And I have realized that my life is a lot better for it. And I've realized I've started having conversations with myself as if I was a drug addict, like talking about social media, where I'm like, I kind of wanted to get on Instagram again, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, but do you really want to do that? You don't want to start? And I was like, why do I think like that? And I was like, oh, because it kind of was like it was there was a moment in my life where like I was on there all the time, or I would constantly check it throughout the day, and it felt like it wasn't like a big deal until I started realizing. The funny thing, like my phone kind of told me how much screen time I had on certain apps or whatever, and it was like, you spend a lot of time on Instagram, and I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But you see, just like a drug, the original purpose or the good purpose, like to promote this podcast.
Right.
Social media is great
It
for
is,
that.
yeah.
Can be used great for that.
Right.
And we have delved into it a little bit. But then again, if you take it and let it turn into something ugly and dark,
It's a tool.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool, and you have to be mature enough to use the tool.
Right.
And we have a
Right.
lot of people that aren't. We have kids that are using it. I gave it up for Lent, and I haven't been back on. I will promote this on it. I will absolutely push this out.
Right.
But I haven't been on
With
it
it do with
at
your eyes
all.
closed.
I know.
How's that been going?
It's fine. I mean, the things that I miss are like the events that I want to be at, right? Because I'm, but I'll be like, I'll ask my husband, like, hey, check this out and see if,
For
you know
me,
what? I'm sorry. Let me interrupt here. I'm old.
Okay.
Okay. Back when I was in school, we were still using the hammer and chisel stuff on the rocks. Okay.
Stop it.
But you know what? It's great for some things.
It is.
It helps me remember
It is.
people's
Oh, right.
birthdays.
Well,
It
and
helps me.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is I constantly talk about Instagram because at one point in time it used to be a platform that I could take photos of things and
Right.
then share them with my friends and clients and stuff.
You talking about that.
I love that. I used to love it because, again, at that point in time, I was like making music, so I could like also share music stuff as well as my photography stuff, and I love that. So that's why I have because that was my social media platform of choice, and I followed like a curated list of like friends, family, other artists I like to see, and I made this switch a few years ago to get off of it when I started realizing I was scrolling through, and a lot of it was like a commercial for this, sponsored for that. We're suggesting this to you because we think you like it. And I was like, where are the people that I actually like?
Because they're listening.
Well, no, it's not. What I'm saying is that it is no longer achieving the purpose that I want. I used to be able to like see photos of my friends, comment on them, have a community, and like talk to people and other artists that I liked.
Yep.
And I slowly started to realize I'm like, this is just like every other platform where it's all curated stuff that they think that I like, or it's sponsored and paid for. Right. And I was like, that's not the purpose.
So the intent was good in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like fentanyl.
There he goes, full circle.
Just
That was
Jason.
like
good.
fentanyl.
Way to bring it all full
It's
circle.
amazing how,
That's
tools can be used for good or bad.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Unfortunately, with social media, it does enable the worst of us to come out because we're not talking directly to an individual.
Right.
Yeah, and it depends on how your brain's
You're
wired,
hidden.
right?
And we've had that conversation about COVID, just taking away the humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wearing a mask, double mask, triple mask, driving in your cars with a mask. Now you don't even see a person's face anymore.
Right.
And that's what the internet has done too. They got great internet balls, but in real life, would they really say something like that?
They would not.
Right.
No, they wouldn't.
They would not at all.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this show up?
Do you have an awesome conclusion?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
A synopsis
For fentanyl?
No,
Yeah.
just in general.
How do we fix this crisis?
How do we fix it? Oh gosh. I asked every single person that. Everybody I interviewed. The
Right.
DA, everyone.
Oh my gosh.
I think so. I wrote this from a parent's perspective. Let your kids cry. Let them feel some pain. Let them go through some hard stuff. I think that's a way to teach your kids not to look for something to fill that void. And I think as parents, you need to get all the tools you can and know what you don't know. I didn't know anything about this, so I just started researching. Not everybody's going to do that. Listen to some podcasts. Retrospect is a great podcast to listen to for some information.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, I think, honestly, I just think letting your kids go through hard stuff. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I want to say this. When we first started Retrospect, it was always light and fluffy. But then we've delved into some issues to try to help people and help people find information and get information. And I love this podcast because we can do pieces like this.
I agree.
This is amazing to me that we can do this and get this actually worldwide. I don't know if you know this, but Retrospect is worldwide.
That's awesome.
Milwaukee is our second largest city.
Really?
And
Yeah,
and none of us know, even X-Man, no one knows anybody in Milwaukee.
Wow.
Germany is our second biggest country.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. My mom's from Germany. So
Really?
that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, tell Mom.
I will.
And she'll listen.
I'll tell
maybe.
my Oma too. She's 96.
Wow.
And it's
Yeah.
it's just amazing to be able to do this in an informative way that helps people.
Yeah.
And I also, again, this originally this show was based from the perspective of three men throughout three different generations. But I love the fact that you came here with this story from the perspective of a mother and her children,
Yeah.
and something that's very, even though I'm not a mother at all, I also had a mother that cared very much about me and protected me a lot, and but also I think really taught me a lot about life in a lot of ways. And so hearing this story, it feels kind of parallel to my life in a way, to have someone that cares about their kids and wants to see.
Thank you.
So it's really awesome to see that and hear this perspective as well.
Thank you. And I know I'm going to screw up at some point, but at least I'm getting the tool. I'm gathering the tools, right?
It's all about,
and that's another thing. Like, I don't think any parents need to claim perfectionism. None of us have it.
No.
We're just trying to raise human beings that are totally different from us.
Yeah.
To be able to raise other human beings if they choose to.
Well, I'm almost 60, and I'll share with y'all I've learned two things in my 60-something years. Would y'all like to hear what they are?
Sure.
Yes.
Please.
There was only one man that walked this planet that was perfect. Would you like to know what number 2 is?
Sure.
I'm not him.
Exactly. That's perfect.
I'm not
There
him.
you go. I remember. I think it was one of our first episodes that we had, and I'll just touch on this for a second. I remember the conversation that I had with my dad. I remember the dinner we were having together when I realized my dad's just a guy.
Yep.
He's just a guy, and he's just trying his best. And
Realizing
sometimes,
your parents are people too.
exactly.
Yeah,
I remember.
That was a great
I
episode.
remember.
That was a good episode.
I remember having that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having dinner with my dad, and him getting kind of emotional and talking to me about something that was very personal to him, and he was talking to me like he was a friend.
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh wow!" My dad that I looked up to and I thought could just tackle any problem. He's like a fix-it kind of guy. So he was also a paramedic and a mechanic. So like he was just the guy that could fix anything, is what it felt
Right.
like. So to have him sit here and get really emotional and just kind of tell me what my thoughts were on something and my opinions on the matter, I was like, I'm seeing my dad as an equal here, which is really weird.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
as a human, right?
Exactly, right.
Human
As a-
beings just happen to have kids.
I said friend. It
Yeah.
was like for the first time I felt like my dad was asking me a question as if I was a friend of his.
Right.
Because I've seen him talk to his friends, and I was like, this is tripping me up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, we're just people, just trying
Right.
our best to make ends meet sometimes, and you
Yeah.
know, hey.
My
And
dad used to tell me, don't cry in front of your kids. And I said, I'm absolutely going to cry in front of my kids because I want them to see feelings aren't facts, emotions pass. This is life,
Yeah.
and you can cry in front of me.
Right.
And then we're going to laugh. And then, and it's all part of life.
Exactly.
And I just hope one day my stepson realizes that I'm new to this whole thing, and I'm just trying to do the best I can for him.
Yeah.
Make the best decisions possible for him. Sometimes no is no. Sometimes we have to set boundaries.
Right.
And that's huge in this drug world, talking about fentanyl, is that boundaries are important. Being able to say no is just as important. You need to say no when that kid offers you a drink or a pill
Exactly.
or here smoke this or here vape this. Say no. It's actually okay to say no. It's okay to say no to your kids.
Yep.
And just learn that, man, yes is a great word sometimes, but so is no. So no can be just as important as saying yes to something.
And I would hope that any of our listeners out there that may be at a bad point in their life where they might slip into a very destructive habit, that maybe this episode might cause them to think differently.
Reach out and
Reach out to those
touch base with somebody you care
that
about.
care about you.
Yeah.
And for those who may find themselves in positions where they feel like that no one cares for them, there are people who can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't go down that road. You're going to destroy your life, and you're going to destroy other people
Other
along
people's
with
lives too. Yep.
you. So
This is a wonderful conversation, and I love that we have parlayed this whole conversation that was very heavy and about drugs and about some very awful statistics. We were able to turn this around to be encouraging and also a very touching, I think, ending to this conversation. I thought it was very great, and I loved this. If for anybody out there, where can they find you again?
So
April?
it's April Capochino. It's just a long.
I love that name.
It's Myers.com. So it's April Capochino Myers, all one word, aprilcapochinomyers.com. And that's where all my writing lives. So anything I've published, not everything I've published, but some stuff that I've published in different magazines and newspapers, some blogs that I've done about my kids, and then my big projects. So my next big project about juvenile crime, that's going to go up there too. That's what I'm working on right
that's
now.
what you're working on
That's what I'm doing
now.
right now.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Teaser into the
Yeah.
Yeah,
May-
which is connected, right?
Oh,
All
yeah.
of this is
Yeah.
connected.
We may have
yeah.
to bring her back on
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
do
right.
another episode.
Give me a few months.
I was gonna say,
I
is it
think
going to be
I
another?
might have a juvenile you can interview.
Is it going to be another 9-parter? You
It
think?
probably is going to be big because
Okay.
again, like I love all news, right? Like I love our local news people, and
Yeah.
I know that it's very quick, but my stuff's very slow. I want to really examine
Of course.
everything, and I'm looking at the brain again. The brain fascinates me because I don't think people are studying it as much as they should,
Yeah.
especially with juveniles. So I didn't realize there's parts of the brain that actually do not develop based on trauma and some other
Oh my
issues. Yeah, so
gosh.
I wanted to look at that.
That sounds heavy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll let you know. It'll be up
April,
there.
I hope to see you maybe
Yeah.
at Keep Tiger Town
I
Beautiful
know.
cleanup.
We've had baseball tournaments every weekend, but I will be back out there.
Okay.
I love that group.
Well, for
it's a great
anyone
group.
that has any comments or suggestions or wants to just reach out to us, we have a Facebook page /Retrospect Pod, or you can just type in Linktree /Retrospect Pod to see all of our links and all the different places you can listen to us, or just Retrospect on any of the major podcasting platforms, and you should be able to see us that way. But anyways, until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. God bless.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're the best. Peace.